Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony of the Sean Diddy Combs trial, as reported by Inner City Press. The courtroom was tense when the doors opened on day 7, but no one expected what happened next. Oprah Winfrey, a woman known for steering clear of controversy, calmly walked into the courtroom and took the stand. In a moment that defied the media storm around Sean Diddy Combs, she looked straight at the jury and said something no one anticipated. He is innocent. The media had painted a picture of Diddy as a monster, but Oprah came with a different truth. One based on her experience, her intuition, and what she claimed were conversations that had never been made public until now. The gallery fell quiet. The world watched. And as Oprah spoke, one thing became clear. This trial wasn't just about one man's guilt. It was about who the world chooses to believe. No one had seen her name on the witness list, no press leaks, no speculation. And yet, just before the court reconvened on day 7, a low murmur spread across the gallery. Security was repositioned, a side door was opened, and there she was. Oprah Winfrey, the most recognizable woman in television history, stepped into the courtroom without saying a word. Dressed in a gray tailored suit, glasses perched low on her nose, she moved with the same calm authority that had once ruled every living room in America. But this wasn't a studio. This was federal court. And she wasn't conducting an interview. She was testifying. The reaction was instant. Reporters began typing furiously. Phones buzzed under the table. Even the sketch artists started fresh pages. Diddy's legal team stood from their bench, not out of obligation, but out of disbelief. Diddy himself looked up, mouth slightly open, and appeared stunned. He whispered something to his lawyer, who responded with a shrug that said, "We didn't know either." The judge raised a brow but gave no objection as the bailiff confirmed her clearance. "Ms. Winfrey," the clerk said, "you may take the stand." Every seat in the room leaned forward as she approached. Oprah took her oath slowly, enunciating each word like it carried weight. And then, just as the courtroom fell into a tense silence, she spoke. "I'm here today because I cannot sit quietly while a man I've known for over 20 years is being portrayed as something I do not recognize." That sentence landed like a shockwave. Prosecutors paused. Jurors turned their heads. The gallery froze. She continued, "I did not come here under subpoena. I did not come here to salvage a friendship. I came here because I believe what is happening is a case of misinterpretation. A tragic public unraveling built on half-truths, whispers, and momentum." From that moment on, it was clear. Oprah wasn't there to give context. She was there to challenge the foundation of the entire prosecution, and no one was prepared for how bold she was about to be. As she settled into the witness chair, Oprah's voice was steady but firm, the kind of voice that had once soothed millions, now slicing through a courtroom gripped with anticipation. She began by acknowledging the seriousness of the charges against Sean Diddy Combs, stating that she would never belittle the pain of any alleged victim. But her tone quickly shifted from compassion to resolve. "That said," she continued, "I have known Mr. Combs in both public and private life, and the Sean I know is not the man described in these testimonies." The prosecution bristled. One of the lead attorneys leaned in to whisper something, but the judge allowed Oprah to continue uninterrupted. She detailed how she first met Diddy at a charity fundraiser in 1999. He was younger, flashier, yes, but even then, his heart for community work stood out. She mentioned visits to schools in Chicago, late-night phone calls about youth mentorship programs, and financial support he gave anonymously to struggling artists. She referenced private dinners, group retreats, and moments of raw honesty that made me believe he had more heart than ego. Then came a line that jolted the room. "If you believe every word being said about him right now, then you must believe I've been blind for 20 years. And I assure you, I have not." She acknowledged the allegations made by Cassie Ventura, saying, "I watched her grow up in this industry. I believe she's endured hardship, but I do not believe Sean Combs is guilty of the crimes she's laid at his feet." Oprah made it personal. "I have hosted survivors. I've walked beside them. I know their stories. And I also know when stories don't align with the man I've seen up close. What I'm asking this court is not to ignore pain, but to separate separated from presumption. She ended her opening with a statement that sent social media into a frenzy within seconds. "We are building a monster in real time. And I'm here to say, be very careful, because once we turn a man into a monster, it becomes very hard to ever see him as human again." After her opening remarks, the courtroom expected generalities, broad character defense, reputational softening, but Oprah did the unexpected. She went for specifics. With a binder of notes before her, she turned page after page, calmly challenging the prosecution's timeline, tone, and core narrative. She began with the 2010 Las Vegas incident that had resurfaced in multiple testimonies. "I was there," she said, "not at the club, but at the suite later that evening. And I can tell you with certainty, the people describing those events are leaving out context. Important context." She described a scene of celebratory chaos. Yes, but not coercion or criminality. There were contracts being signed, people drinking, but no one was forced. No one was drugged. And there were at least 2 people in that room that I spoke to the next day, both of whom remember things very differently than what's been said here. She then moved to Cassie Ventura's claims, which Oprah handled with delicate phrasing. Cassie is brave for speaking, but bravery does not mean infallibility. She detailed a phone call in 2015 in which Cassie allegedly expressed frustration with her contract, not fear for her safety. "I asked her plainly if she felt abused. Her words were, and I quote, 'I feel boxed in, but that's how it is in this industry.'" That phrase hung in the courtroom. One of the jurors scribbled it down twice. Then, perhaps most controversially, Oprah addressed the testimonies about the so-called freak-off parties. "I've heard about these events. I've seen the media framing, but I've also attended charity dinners and black tie galas hosted by Sean Combs that looked more like fundraising than fantasy." She called the tunnel rumors urban legend meets internet paranoia and urged the court to recognize the difference between spectacle and substantiation. And in what may become the most quoted line of her entire appearance, she added, "If candles and closed doors are all it takes to damn a man, then Hollywood is an open-air prison." Her final point was about Diddy's demeanor. She described him as complex, flawed, but not predatory. She acknowledged that he, like all powerful men, had moments of ego, but "I do not believe he is a trafficker. I do not believe he is a monster. I believe he is a target, and that difference matters." By the time Oprah closed her binder, the jury didn't just see a media mogul defending a mogul. They saw someone who had done her homework and who wasn't afraid to speak against the tide. By now, the courtroom had grown still, not because the trial had slowed, but because Oprah Winfrey had shifted the energy into something almost sacred, reflective, sharp, and unapologetically confrontational. After addressing the allegations head-on, she pivoted to what she claimed was the invisible hand influencing the case from outside the courthouse, the media. Oprah, never one to shy away from talking about the press, began carefully. "I have spent my life in front of cameras, on newsstands, and under headlines. I know the power of a narrative and how quickly that narrative can become a weapon." She turned to the jury, holding their eyes, "And I believe that's what's happening here." She described the public takedown of Diddy not as justice in motion, but as an accelerated spectacle built by algorithms, hashtags, and rage engagement. She referred to the hundreds of viral clips already circulating, many without trial context, painting Diddy as guilty before a verdict had even been considered. When did our culture decide that a trending topic was more credible than a sworn testimony? She asked. Her words stung. The prosecution shifted in their seats, aware of how powerful this line of argument could be in the court of public opinion. Oprah held up a folder of printed tweets and headlines. "Look at these. Diddy the Predator. Music mogul or monster. Cancel Combs. This isn't reporting. It's sentencing." She noted how several of the outlets publishing accusatory stories were the same ones who had once celebrated Diddy's achievements. They crowned him in the 2000s, and they're burning him at the stake in the 2020s. She described it as a cultural convenience. When it suits the moment, people with power are lifted. When it suits the momentum, they're torn down. The court murmured. At least 2 jurors nodded slightly. She continued, referencing her own experience. I have seen headlines twist my words. I've seen stories spun into lies. And I've survived it because I had the resources to correct them. But what happens when someone like Sean, who's already drowning in scandal, has no way to redirect the story? It becomes the truth, not because it's right, but because it's loud. One of the defense attorneys smiled faintly, a rare sight since the trial began. Oprah wasn't done. I am not saying every allegation is false. I am saying that justice cannot be handed down by clickbait. Then came the moment that left the room speechless. She pulled out a printed screenshot from a well-known celebrity blog. It showed a headline claiming Diddy had a hidden bunker of victims beneath one of his homes. She read it aloud, then paused. That headline got 1.4 million clicks. It was based on a Reddit thread started by an anonymous user. No verification, no follow-up. And yet, here we are, with a jury being asked to forget what they've seen online and judge only what they see and hear. It was a scathing critique, not just of the media, but of everyone consuming it, and it struck a chord. Oprah ended that portion of her testimony with one final question to the court. How can a man receive a fair trial in the age of the internet when he's already been tried and executed on every screen in America? And no one had an answer. If the courtroom was stunned by Oprah's attack on the media, what came next cut even deeper. Oprah leaned forward, her tone softened. I'd like to share something that hasn't been made public until now, something that might reshape how we view this entire situation. She explained that in 2015, she and Cassie Ventura had dinner in Los Angeles, a private one-on-one meeting away from publicists, managers, and cameras. At the time, Cassie was going through what Oprah described as a career crossroads. Rumors were swirling about her relationship with Diddy, and whispers of frustration were beginning to bubble to the surface. She was hurting, Oprah said plainly, and I saw it. But it wasn't fear I saw, it was exhaustion. A woman caught between wanting to rise and not knowing how to escape the shadow she was standing in. The courtroom leaned in. Even the judge adjusted slightly in his chair. Oprah continued, Cassie told me she felt stuck in a contract that gave her no room to grow. She felt like she was being treated as a commodity, not a creator. But when I asked her directly if she felt unsafe with Sean Combs, she looked me in the eye and said, no, I just feel forgotten. That line lingered. The prosecution objected, arguing hearsay, but the judge allowed Oprah to proceed, noting that she was establishing prior context to a witness's state of mind, a legal gray zone, but admissible in this case. I am not here to erase her truth, Oprah said, but I am here to add mine. She then shared another conversation, this one allegedly from 2019, when Cassie was publicly separating from Diddy. She called me in tears, said she couldn't take the media pressure anymore. She asked me if I had ever felt like people were writing my story without my permission. I told her, all the time. According to Oprah, Cassie never once used words like assault, abuse, or violence. Instead, she talked about image control, public perception, and feeling like her story had been hijacked. Then Oprah dropped a chilling line. She said to me, and I quote, I just want people to remember I'm more than his girlfriend. Oprah paused. That was the hurt I saw, a woman being reduced. But I didn't see a victim in fear for her life. I saw a woman reclaiming her voice. She added, it is entirely possible that Cassie's memories have evolved, that her perspective has shifted with time and distance, but I can only speak to what I witnessed. And what I witnessed was not a woman trapped in a dungeon. It was a woman trapped in a contract. The courtroom remained silent as Oprah delivered the final line of that segment. Cassie Ventura deserves to be heard, but so does context. And we can't deliver justice if we choose only the version of events that fits the narrative we've already decided to believe. By this point, Oprah had already tackled the allegations, the accusers, and the media's influence. But now she turned to what had become the most whispered about piece of this entire case, the tunnel. In recent weeks, viral posts and alleged whistleblowers had suggested that beneath Diddy's sprawling mansions were secret passageways, Diddy tunnels, that allegedly held victims, video video setups, and all sorts of grotesque purposes. The claims were fantastical, but gripping. Enough so that they became courtroom whispers and online headlines alike. Oprah called it out directly. "I've been to Diddy's homes, not once, but several times over the last 2 decades," she said. "There are basements, there are wine cellars, there are security rooms, there are no tunnels, there is no labyrinth of horror, there are no cages. This isn't a movie, it's a home." She described a 2008 charity planning event held at one of Diddy's New York properties. "I was there for over 8 hours. We moved freely from room to room. No phones were taken, no NDAs were signed. It was not some underground cult," the gallery murmured. But Oprah wasn't done. "These rumors began where all sensational rumors do, online. I've traced the origin of one of the earliest tunnel claims to a post from a self-described former intern who never verified their identity. And yet, within days, that story had 1 million views and was being treated like fact." She referenced past urban legends, secret bunkers, cloning labs, devil worship. "The internet has made us hungry for the outrageous. And now, we're so full of these conspiracy calories, we can't tell fact from fantasy." She also warned the court of the danger these kinds of stories posed to real justice. "There may be real survivors out there, victims of real abuse, who need their stories taken seriously. But every time we entertain fairy tales, we dull the edge of truth. We make the courtroom a stage, and that's not what this is supposed to be." The judge allowed her to continue uninterrupted, signaling that her points were within scope. Oprah ended her dismissal of the Diddy tunnels theory with a single statement: "I do not believe Sean Combs is a saint. I do not believe he is above reproach, but I do not believe he is a monster hiding people beneath his floorboards, and shame on anyone who sells that fiction to make a fortune from someone else's downfall." By the time Oprah addressed the elephant in the room, Monique's explosive testimony from the previous day, the courtroom was already primed for confrontation. Monique had ignited headlines by accusing Diddy, Tyler Perry, and even Oprah herself of participating in a machine of silence. Now, Oprah was reclaiming that narrative, but she didn't raise her voice. She didn't attack. She dismantled, strategically, methodically, and with unnerving calm. "I watched Ms. Jackson's testimony," Oprah said, using Monique's legal name, "and I have no doubt she spoke her truth. But truth is not monolithic. One person's truth is not the entire picture." There was no need to explain who Monique was. The courtroom had already heard her fierce words about being blackballed, ignored, and silenced by those she once called friends. Oprah acknowledged it all. Yes, there was tension. Yes, there were misunderstandings. But this trial is not about old wounds. It's about criminal allegations. And conflating personal grievances with federal crimes is not justice. It's confusion. She paused, then delivered a line that caught the courtroom's breath. "Pain is real, but pain can also distort." Oprah pushed back on Monique's suggestion that her silence had protected predators. "I have never protected abuse. I have never shielded criminals. And I find it dangerous to suggest that disagreement equals complicity." She even referenced the 2010 interview Monique had criticized, the one where Oprah aired comments from her estranged brother, a man who had admitted to abusing her. Oprah didn't deny it. "That was a decision I regret," she admitted. "Not because it was wrong, but because it caused her pain. I called her after. I apologize. But again, that personal conflict is not a reflection of this case." The defense leaned forward, sensing the room was tilting again in their favor. But Oprah wasn't there to bury Monique. She acknowledged the courage it took to speak. Monique's voice matters. Her pain matters. But we cannot allow her personal vendettas to be turned into prosecutorial narratives. This isn't about Hollywood beef. This is about federal law. Then, to everyone's surprise, Oprah revealed that she had documentation, emails and transcripts from previous conversations that refuted Monique's timeline. She claimed certain conversations happened in 2008. "I have proof they occurred in 2012, and, under very different circumstances. She offered the documents to the court. The prosecution objected again, calling it an attempt to discredit a witness, but the judge overruled, citing relevance due to Monique's prior testimony implicating Oprah directly. Then came the dagger. "I know what this trial feels like," Oprah said. "It feels like retribution dressed up as justice. But it's not retribution we need, it's clarity. And when we weaponize trauma to settle scores, we don't honor survivors, we exploit them." The court sat silent, suspended in the weight of her words. And as she concluded her rebuttal, Oprah looked toward the gallery, not with malice, but with sadness. "We can't afford to confuse moral anger with legal responsibility. Not here, not now, not when so much is at stake." Oprah's voice had remained steady for the duration of her testimony, but now, as she entered the final stretch, something changed. She grew quieter, more personal. She wasn't just defending Diddy anymore. She was pleading with the court to see the bigger picture. What she said next would blur the line between courtroom and confessional. "I've known Sean Combs since before many of the people in this courtroom were old enough to vote. I've seen him at his lowest, and I've seen him try to rise above it." She paused. "But what I'm seeing now is not justice. It's a witch hunt." The term hung in the air, heavy and controversial. Some in the gallery frowned, others nodded. "We are living in a moment where accusation alone is a verdict," Oprah continued, "where a man's entire life can be reduced to a handful of headlines, anonymous testimonies, and social media commentary." She looked directly at the jury. "Ask yourself, when did you start believing he was guilty? Was it after you heard the evidence? Or was it before, when you saw the news coverage, the memes, the hashtags?" Her voice trembled slightly. "I know what it means to have your motives questioned, to have your name twisted into something ugly, to be told you must be lying, or blind, or complicit because you won't join the mob." She described a private moment in 2021. Diddy had just canceled a major appearance after a tabloid leaked an unsubstantiated claim. "He called me," Oprah said. "He didn't sound angry. He sounded broken. He said, 'I've made mistakes, but I'm not a monster.' And I believed him, because I've seen him when the cameras aren't rolling." Then came a powerful admission. "If you want to prosecute Sean Combs for being arrogant, for being excessive, for being flawed, go ahead. But that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is the attempted destruction of a legacy." The courtroom grew quiet again. Even the judge appeared contemplative. Oprah tapped her hand on the witness stand. "This trial is about more than one man. It's about how we treat black men in power, how we assume guilt before we examine fact, how we erase 30 years of contributions over 30 minutes of rumor." Then she went further. "Do we want justice, or do we want a sacrifice? Because it feels like this courtroom has already made its decision, and it has nothing to do with evidence." And just like that, Oprah had turned the tables. The woman who had been named as a silent conspirator 24 hours earlier was now framing herself as the last voice of reason in a courtroom gone mad. The defense rested their hands on their notepads, letting Oprah's words do all the work. And as she looked around the courtroom, eyes scanning everyone, from the prosecution to the sketch artists, she ended with this: "You can cancel a man, you can cancel a career, but you cannot cancel the truth. And the truth is, Diddy deserves a fair trial, not a public stoning." The atmosphere had grown thick, tense, somewhere between reverence and discomfort. Oprah Winfrey, now several hours into her testimony, finally reached her closing statement. The gallery was packed. Jurors were visibly drained, but alert. Diddy sat still, face solemn, hands tightly clasped. Oprah took one last breath and began. "I didn't come here to protect a friend. I came here to protect a principle." She reiterated that she knew her testimony would be controversial. "There are people who will say I've betrayed women, that I've enabled abuse, that I'm choosing loyalty over justice, but I reject that. I reject the notion that we must abandon nuance for narrative." Her voice rose slightly. "I am not defending every decision Sean Combs has ever made, but I am defending his right to not be buried by accusations before a single verdict is read." She looked to the jury, almost like she was addressing them personally. "You are not just deciding a case, you're deciding deciding what kind of society we want to be. One where due process still matters, or one where headlines hand out life sentences. Oprah then turned her attention to the gallery, where cameras were still forbidden, but where sketches and words would still paint their own picture of her. Let them say what they will. Let them write what they want. I've lived long enough to know that truth will always find its way through the noise. She pulled a folded note from her pocket. It was handwritten, her own words, not her legal team's. She read aloud, "This system doesn't just judge people. It consumes them. It devours their mistakes, magnifies their sins, and forgets their humanity. I'm not here to rewrite the rules. I'm here to remind you that they exist." As she finished, there was no applause, no dramatic outburst, just stillness. The judge thanked her for her testimony, and as Oprah stepped down from the witness stand, Diddy rose to his feet, not to speak, not to celebrate, but to simply nod in acknowledgement, eyes glassy, face heavy. Oprah exited the courtroom the same way she entered, silent, composed, and unshakably certain. But what she left behind was anything but quiet, because in a trial built on allegations, fear, and decades of silence, Oprah had just